1.1a is on fractions. So we want to be able to add and subtract fractions with common denominators and with uncommon denominators. So example 1, fractions are where you have a part and a whole. The part is always the numerator, the top of your fraction, and the whole is your denominator, the bottom of your fraction. So in our first example, we can see 4, 6. We have 4 equal parts of our whole, which is 6 total parts. And we can see it expressed here in 4 different ways. So if we wanted to draw an example, or similar example, of 5/8, we would need to start with a shape with 8 equal parts. That's our whole. So I'm going to draw a rectangle here, and I'm going to split it into 8. So I'm going to split it in half, and then split that in half again. So right now that's 4. So if I split each of these in half, that's going to be 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I want 5/8. So I'm going to shade in 5. So that's 5 parts of our whole, 5/8. So now, fractions or fair shares, right? So if we have 6 equal parts or fair shares, right, that is our whole, those 6 equal parts. And then if we have 4 of them are shaded, 1, 2, 3, 4, we have 4 out of 6 is our fraction. So we want to be able to add fractions using our fair shares, or equal parts. So for this first example, we have 2/4. So we have our shape drawn into 4 equal parts, and 2 of them are shaded. So that's our 2/4 plus 1/4. Well, if we add that all together, 2/4 plus 1/4 gives us 3/4. So that would be our answer. Okay. So then if we have 4/9 plus 3/9, well, we could draw our shape with 9 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have 4/9 plus 3/9. So all together, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7/9. Now we want to subtract 3/5 minus 1/5. Okay, so if we draw our shape with 5 equal parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 3 of them. That's 3/5, but we actually want to take away 1, which would just leave us with 2/5. And last but not least, 2/3 plus 1/3. Well, I'm going to draw my shape with 2/3 plus another third. That's the whole shape. So 2/3 plus 1/3 is 1, or 1 whole. Example 4, let's look at fractions with different denominators. So example 3, right, we had our fair shares. They were all the same denominator. So we could just add them together or subtract them. But when we have different denominators, we actually need to find a common denominator before we can combine them. Go ahead and write that down. We need a common denominator before we can add fractions together. So we want to take 1/2 and add 1/3. Well, 2 and 3 are not the same denominator. So again, we need to find a common denominator before we can combine these. So let's think about it. If we have 1 whole, we can consider a half of that for our 1/2. And we want to take that and split it into equal parts here. So we could split that into 3/6. And we can take a whole, and 1/3 of a whole we could split into 2/6. So our common denominator is 6. So we could take 3/6 plus 2/6, which is 5/6. And that is what 1/2 plus 1/3 equals 5/6. But again, we had to find a common denominator before we can figure that out. So let's look at a couple more examples here. We want to find the least common denominator, or LCD, by using multiples of each denominator. So we have 3/4 minus 1/2. Well, again, 4 and 2, those aren't the same. So we need to think about the lowest common denominator. Well, I know that 2 is a multiple of, or 2 goes into 4. So let's think about this. 2 times 2 is 4. So we could multiply 2 times 2, and anything we do to our denominator, we need to do to the numerator. So we have 3/4, and then 1/2. 1 times 2 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So what we did was we used our lowest common denominator to take 1/2 and change it. So 3/4 and 2/4 have the same denominator, and now that they have the same denominator, we can combine them. 3/4 minus 2/4 is 1/4. Okay, so let's try this again. We have 2/5 plus 1/4. So 5 and 4, let's think about what 5 and 4 both go into. Well, 5 goes into 5 and into 10, 15, 20. 4 goes into 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 times 5 is 20. So they both are multiples of 20, which means we want to change the denominator for both of these fractions. So I'm going to multiply 2/5 by 4/4. Okay, so then 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 5 is 20, which is what we were looking for. And then I'm going to do the same thing with 1/4. But I'm going to multiply it by 5/5. 1 times 5 is 5. 4 times 5 is 20, which again is what we were looking for. So what we did was we used that lowest common denominator, which is 20, in order to create a common denominator for our fractions. So now that we have 8/20 plus 5/20, we can combine these. 8 plus 5 is 13/20. Let's try a couple more. So 2/3 minus 1/9. Well, again, 3 and 9, those are not the same, so we have to find our common denominator. Well, 3 goes into 9. So, 3 times 3 is 9, which means we can multiply by 3/3. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 3 is 9. And then 1/9, we don't have to change that because 6/9 minus 1/9, those already have common denominators. So all we needed to do was to change that first, that first fraction. So now 6/9 minus 1/9, 6 minus 1 would be 5/9. Okay, 5/6 plus 1/9. Well, 6 and 9, they don't go into each other, so we have to think about this. Let's see, 6 goes into 6. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 4 is 24. Let's think about 9. 9 goes into 9. 9 times 2 is 18. Look at that. 8, they both are multiples of 18. Okay, so 6 times 3 gives us 18, so I want to multiply 5/6 by 3/3. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 6 is 18. Then we need to do the same thing with 1/9. Well, 9 times 2 is 18, so we want to multiply by 2. 1 times 2 is 2. 9 times 2 is 18. So now we have 15/18 plus 2/18. These have a common denominator, so we can combine them to get 17/18. All right, so important things to remember. When we're combining fractions, they need to have the same denominator. So when you look down here and you try a few of these on your own, number 1, you can just add those together because they have that common denominator of 9. 1/9 plus 3/9, 1 plus 3 would be 4/9. But for number 4, 5 and 4, those are different. We don't have a common denominator, so you need to think about your lowest common denominator and then multiply to get a common denominator before you can actually add your fractions.